Welcome to the Sermon Podcast of South Hills Church in Costa Mesa. My name is Chris Kretzu, and I'm the campus pastor here. Thank you for carving out the time to listen to this today. I hope that you will be encouraged and challenged, and ultimately that you'll have a deeper sense of God's love for you. I'll be back after the message is over, but until then, I hope that you enjoy this episode. Starting this series, this idea of Family Month, we're starting it off with the question, how can I see past my frustrations? How can I see past my frustrations, the relationships that I have? And again, it's called Family Month. We all have frustrations with family members, but we also have frustrations just in general in relationships. Some of these things are specific with family, but really a lot of these things kind of apply to every relationship that we have. And I don't have to point out or help you find someone that you are frustrated with. We all have those relationships, and maybe someone in your home, and maybe someone at work, and maybe we all have those relationships. So what does it look like because I don't want to just be frustrated with this person. I don't want to spend the next, 12 years, 13 years being frustrated with my kid, just waiting for them to get out of the house. I don't want to spend the rest of my marriage just quietly frustrated. How can we see past our frustration? How can we start to develop a healthier relationship? I think one of the things, my wife and I, we've been married almost 14 years, and it's longer than a lot of people and not as long as some people, but we're at that stage where it's kind of fun because as we see couples that are just starting to date or maybe newly married couples, they always end up in this stage, and we probably went through it also, where the other person can do no wrong. Everything is wonderful all the time. I remember this even from aspects of when we were dating. I didn't really recognize it at the time, but when we first started dating, there was this reality that so many things, everything just kind of felt ideal. I remember one of the things I really loved the most about my wife when we started dating is that she's incredibly independent. She don't need no man for nothing. But I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, I love this about her. And now 14 years later, it's like, I'd like to be needed every once in a while, But there's these things where it's like, in this moment, I think this is incredible. And I know you guys have had this experience in some of your relationships. Later on, some of those same exact things are no longer incredible. I love that she's independent still. But there's this aspect of like, man, that feels different now than it used to. We would watch movies when we were dating, and she would fall asleep with her head on my shoulder. I was like, oh, this is wonderful. Like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And now it's like, would you please get your hair out of my face? Like, there's just some shifts that happen. This is a reality so many people go through. It's not just dating. It's not just marriage. This is a reality for relationships in general. And there's actually a term for this. There's an idea that people have put this term to where everything that someone says or does is this magical, beautiful thing. Everything is right all the time. This term is called the halo effect. The halo effect is a tendency for a positive impression in one area to create positive assumptions about other, often unrelated areas. It's like, well, because of this one positive thing, or maybe these few positive things, everything is positive. Everything kind of gets this halo. It's all perfect. It's all good. It's like, even the bad things, it's like, it's not that bad. I mean, it's like, well, it's a little bit of murder every once in a while. It's like, okay. This halo effect is like this thing that we start to drape over people, over relationships. We don't notice some of the warning signs or the red flags because of the positive things. We don't notice the person that we just met isn't good with money, or they can't hold a job, or they're kind of cruel to other humans because they think that you're attractive. And they want to spend time with you. It's like, well, they have great taste, So obviously everything else in their life, it makes sense because this piece I value. I appreciate this thing. This halo effect oftentimes can be challenging. The reality is that most things in life, there's an opposite as well. So just like there's a halo effect, there is an inverse reality called the horn effect. And it's basically the same exact thing. And we're not talking about horn like devil, although maybe for some of your relationships, this is more of like a fog horn, a tugboat horn. This is the tendency for a negative impression in one area to create negative assumptions about other often unrelated ideas, other unrelated areas. So this idea of like, man, there's this really difficult thing, or they made a bad choice, and maybe it was a legitimately bad choice. All of a sudden, we start to extrapolate that across every aspect of every decision, of everything that they say. All of a sudden, this one thing or this one area, or maybe it's a couple things, maybe they're serious, maybe they're smaller frustrations or annoyances, but all of a sudden, it just becomes like it's the focus point. We can't find anything else. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this kind of illustration before, but look at this picture. Can you guys tell me, what do you guys see? The black dot, right? It's kind of annoying. It's not even in the center of the slide, which is really what bothers me the most. There's this reality that we look at this and we kind of can't help but notice this tiny black dot. There is so much other space, clean, bright, space to put other things, to do other things with, space that has yet to be filled in, but we're still somehow drawn to this black dot. And in so many of our relationships, again, marriage, dating, kids, adult siblings, friends, whatever it might be, so many of our relationships, there is so much possible. There are so many good things. There's so many parts of the story that haven't even been written yet, but we have such a difficult time focusing on anything besides the black dot. This horn effect, it takes this thing and it says, this is the thing. This is all of who they are. It's all negative. It's all frustrating. I just can't be around them anymore. And one of the challenges is that with both the halo and the horn effect, we never realize when we're in it. We never realize when we're doing it. It's difficult to see in the moment that I'm just assuming that it's all negative or that I'm assuming that it's all positive. We all have people in our lives that regardless of who they are, the stories and experiences that we have had with them, the interactions that we may have had, we still kind of see them under this light, and it happens both ways. Maybe the horn effect in your life is, it's a person that has a view or a perspective. Maybe it's about faith, maybe it's about politics or kind of society and the way we interact. Maybe they have a perspective and you very much disagree. And I feel like this is incredibly true of our culture across the board over the last year and a half. It's like, well, if they think that, then I don't trust anything they think. If they can agree with that, then how could anything else they feel be accurate or true? It's this horn effect of saying, no. If that's what they think, then why would I trust them with anything else in my life? I've done this. I have had this experience. There's people that I know that I have struggled and I've had to make intentional choices of we don't have to agree on everything. I can still believe that they are good and loving and trustworthy in other areas. And then the halo effect, I feel like this is the easiest thing to see even just in my kids' elementary school. I've got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and my kids are perfect. My kid couldn't be the one that started the fight. My kid couldn't have been the one that said that to the teacher. Surely there was another kid that started. My kid is an angel. It's a little me. What could possibly be wrong with them? This halo effect, the horn effect, we experience these things in different ways. Sometimes it's the people closest to us. Sometimes it's people we may not even personally know, but we still just make assumptions or judgments, extrapolate these ideas across everything because of what we've heard about them. We're never really neutral about anyone in our life. We always have assumptions and feelings about each person. Scientists and studies have found that even just walking up to a person, we have already made judgments about them and just walking towards them before anyone says anything, based on the color of their skin, the shape of their face, what they're wearing, what kind of car they're driving. All of these things start to inform, and we start to create a story about them before we actually even know what's true. I do the same thing in movies, mystery movies. You watch these movies, it's like, okay, who's the bad guy? And you're starting to make assumptions, and most of them are based on that person has a creepy voice. They probably did it. It's like, that doesn't mean that they're a bad person, but there's just these assumptions, these biases that we kind of fall into. And in a different, but still somehow connected way, this happens in our relationships. We have these assumptions and these biases that we fall into. My first year of college is where all of my best stories come from. I was 17 when I went to college, and I lived on campus, and It was only smart choices that I made. But it was this really conservative Christian school, and at the base of the dorms, there was a guard shack. And there wasn't a gate or anything. There was 2 speed bumps on either side and a guard shack. And this college thought that it would be a great idea for the guard to be college students that were going to college there. And so inevitably, it was these students, and they generally were just studying. They were just paying attention to their tests and whatever it was, and we had to drive past this all the time, day, night, all time. They were always there, and they rarely ever looked outside of the guard shack. It's like, what is the point of this thing? Like, it made no sense. So my friends and I, we had this really great idea, very mature and smart, and we said, hey, you know what would be funny? Let's see how terrifying we can be and what we can get away with. So we decided to load up in the back of my friend's pickup truck with baseball bats and ski masks, and we drove up to the guard shack, paused at the speed bump. The guy looked up, or didn't look up from his book. He just kind of like waved us on, and then we just drove straight by the guard shack. Like, well, this is fantastic. I've never felt more safe. There's this reality with our brains that we're kind of hardwired with this ability to save energy, save time. And so aspects of even our habits, about 40% of the decisions that you make in a day, the things you do, aren't actually intentional. They're just based on your brain is used to these routines, these habits. It's always looking for ways to do this. And there's a part of our brain that actually is wiring us to look out for threats. Not the guard at my college, but most people's brains are wired. And so there is a natural and a safe thing to be able to have the sense of, okay, this isn't okay. This is unsafe. This is dangerous. This is a good thing in and of itself. But other times, it causes us to be unnecessarily judgmental, unnecessarily biased in ways that we're not even really aware of. The truth is that people are complex and complicated, and we've got to be intentional about the ways that we choose to be in relationships with them. Relationships are layered and nuanced. No one is ever one thing or the other. We have moments where we're good, we have moments where we're bad, we have moments when we're kind, we have moments when we're not, we have moments when we're loving, moments when we're not. It's this layered reality. And you cannot have deep relationships with people if you're not willing to allow another person to show you who they are. You have to allow them to be part of that story instead of just making these judgments and the horn effect or the halo effect or just extrapolating this one instance. A challenge for so many of us is that the person we assume the worst of, often it's not a politician, it's not someone on Facebook, it's not someone removed, it's people in our homes. The people that we have the harshest judgment for are oftentimes people that we love the most, that we want to be the closest with. Maybe even you have been that person and your family has made judgments or assumptions or applied one decision or one mistake to all of your life. And we don't like that feeling. None of us want to feel defined in that way. But at the same time, we still do that to other people. We still have that same challenge towards others. Here's the reason we have to address this within ourselves if we want to have healthy relationships. When you get to a place where it feels like no matter what you do, the people around you have already decided how they see you, it feels defeating. And it leads to a couple different destructive responses. There's kind of 2 destructive responses to this horn effect idea. The first one, if you feel like it doesn't matter what I do, they're going to view me this way anyways, we can start to say, you know what, I might as well just be what you think I already am because it doesn't matter. If you think I'm a liar and I always get judged as a liar, even though I'm not lying, then what's the point of not lying? I might as well just lie. If you think I'm not trustworthy, if you think I'm not whatever the thing is, all of a sudden we can start to feel the sense of just being defeated because we don't have the ability to move out of what people's judgment of us is. Sometimes we have felt that. Sometimes we have made other people to feel that. The second thing that sometimes can happen is this thought of, well, I guess the only way to be someone else is to go somewhere else or to be with someone else. The only way that I actually get to show that this is who I am is just to leave, is to say, oh, I'm not going to spend time with my family anymore. They don't know me. They don't trust me. They don't believe me. I'm not going to spend time. I'm not going to work on this marriage anymore. I'm out. This isn't who I am. You refuse to acknowledge it. And so all of a sudden, we just, in our minds, these unhealthy responses to this pain. But oftentimes, we cause people to feel this pain because we refuse to allow them to be something other than the one belief, the frustration, the horn effect, this thing that we have applied to them. So how do we keep from boxing people into this one thing? How do we keep from driving away the people that we love by seeing them through the lens of our frustrations? In Colossians chapter 3, there's a few verses in here I want to read. Colossians 3, starting in verse 12. The New Testament primarily is written as letters. These letters were written to people that were making up the very first churches. It kind of feels weird because there's churches everywhere now, and they look a little bit different. But these churches that were springing up after Jesus' resurrection, the people that would go to these churches, and they were primarily held just in homes, they were showing up and choosing to be around people that were totally different than them. But it's not just that they were totally different from them, it's that everything else in life would cause them to view the other one with distrust, with negativity. This was the only time that a wealthy person would choose to sit at a table with a slave. This is the only time that Jewish people would choose to sit at a table with non-Jewish people. And the entire time there was this battle within them of like, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm sitting here with that person. You know they're not even Jewish? You know that person is a slave? They don't have anything to say. They don't have any value. They don't have any good. There's this horn effect that they had applied because of this one aspect of who they are. They must be this way. And so Paul writes a letter to this church, and he's addressing this very thing of saying, hey, it's difficult to be around people that are frustrating, people that you don't trust, people that you maybe were raised in a home or a culture or a faith that caused you to view and assume something about all of them that isn't necessarily true. And this is what Paul says in verse 12 of chapter 3. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, which I think is an important kind of clue because, again, he's writing this to this mixed bag of people who are constantly trying to figure out a reason why that person doesn't count. He's like, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Now, it's a little bit interesting because sometimes we can hear this idea of, well, you just need to love them. And it feels like very intangible, kind of ambiguous. It's like, yes, love. Let me just do that. Let me just flip that switch and just love them well. But he says, I love this idea. He says, clothe yourselves, AKA, this is probably not the way you naturally are. So you're going to have to choose to put this on. You're going to have to choose this, make these decisions. And he says compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, which almost exclusively focus on what it takes to care for a person that's difficult, to care for a person that's frustrating, to care for a person that you may live life with and you may see them in the morning and at night and everywhere in between. And these are the people where this is challenging. He's saying, no, you need to choose to have these things as you show up in these relationships. It's not going to accidentally happen. And over all of these things, also put on love. And I think as I read it, the way that I feel he's saying this is like, you're not going to get these things right all the time. And so if you're trying to decide how to act, if you're not quite sure exactly which way to handle it, just err on the side of love. It binds them together in a sense of unity. Another translation, it says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. This is a difficult thing. This idea is a difficult thing because honestly, I am, and I'm sure that many of us are, we're kind of wired in the sense of like, I don't want to just let them get away with it. Like, they're kind of annoying. Or that thing that they did, or this thing that they do on a regular basis, it's a little bit frustrating. This problem, we kind of have this sense. And there's small things, and then there's big things also, where it's like, well, there should be some sort of justice, right? Like, shouldn't I be avenged? And if nobody else is going to do it, then I should just do this myself. We are wired to want this. It's a difficult thing. This word allow, sometimes it's translated to overlook. Saying make allowances or overlook each other's faults. Other ways of saying this are to be tolerant of, endure, be patient with, and what I imagine will be your favorite, quietly suffer. And some of you, that's what your family feels like. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe not. There's not enough laughter for that to be a joke, I guess. So, but there's this reality that sometimes, is this actually an issue, or is this just something that gets under my skin? Is this actually something that needs to be addressed, or is this because my 6-year-old doesn't know how to eat Fruit Loops without also getting them all over the floor? Is there like a big picture danger thing, or is this just a small frustration? I was talking to First Service earlier, and I said, before I got married, it's adorable, really. But I was like, you know what? I always hear about how wives hate that their husbands leave the toilet seat up and like toothpaste is all over. I'm never going to be that husband. And so I spent time, like, I'm going to always put the seat down, and all this effort going into, like, I'm going to be this husband. I think I was focusing on probably the wrong things. There's like another list of issues I probably could have spent some time on. But honestly, it's like, I don't leave toothpaste all over the place. I always put the toilet seat down. I'm not bragging, but I would like a little applause. No, I'm just kidding. But now what's happened is I've got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old who never put the toilet seat down, and there's toothpaste. It's like finger painting on the mirror. I don't even know how it happens. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. I spent years trying to perfect this. These things, it's like, is this really something for me to be upset every night at bedtime? Is this how I want to end every day with my kids, is being frustrated because they did it again? 10 years running, 6 years in a row, you're the champion at, is this really something that I need to let do this? Or do I need to make allowances for? Do I need to recognize they're 6 and 10? Do I need to recognize maybe I should teach them how to do it the right way? It's like, do I need to actually just overlook some of these things rather than letting them get to me in this way? And then offenses, this idea of forgiving each other's offenses, anyone who offends you. It's an interesting thing because it talks about, it's not just sins. It's not like they have done something biblically wrong and I need to make sure they understand that. This has to do with anything from faults and wrongdoings and mistakes to difficult, kind of annoying quirks, uninformed perspectives, irritating habits. Paul's essentially saying, if you want to be in a relationship, a healthy, growing relationship with another human, you need to figure out how to start working on this. And it's important for you to know that you need to do this because this is what Jesus is doing for you. This is what God has done for you. In your brokenness, before you wanted to admit it, your annoying quirks, whatever those things are, God loved you. Jesus forgave you before you asked for it, before you recognized what your issues are. And this is kind of the piece of stepping into, what does it mean to follow Jesus? It means I'm going to follow the way of Jesus. And this is the way that Jesus loves, with kindness and gentleness and compassion. He's patient with my quirks and my issues. There is so much that he does not focus on because of the reality of his love for me and his love for you. And we get to replicate that in our relationships. This is a challenge for me, and I don't say it because I have a great solution or that I've solved this issue for me. I don't know if you guys watch Avengers, and there's this part where Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, they're like, how do you keep from getting angry? How do you keep from just being the Hulk all the time? And he's like, I'm always a little bit angry. And sometimes I feel that way. Specifically with my kids. I have this hair trigger with my kids to where it's like these little things, they get to me in a way that they shouldn't. And I have to intentionally choose to not focus on those things because otherwise it just it gets to me, I get upset, and that's not who I want to be as a dad. That's not the relationship that I want to have as a kid. I say this again, not because that's the example you should follow, but because this is something that we all in different relationships, in your marriage, with your parents, with your siblings, with your kids. This is something that all of us have to say. What does it look like for me to choose to clothe myself with something that is not going to naturally show up? I'm choosing this. All right. I lost my place. Yes, Avengers. Great. Back to the Hulk. So what happened was, okay, so here's what we are not supposed to do, but what should we do? What's a practical thing that we can say, okay, I want to choose to move this way. I want to choose to try and apply this idea. We're not supposed to harbor frustration. I'm not supposed to hold this one thing against them and assume that all of them is bad or are bad. I'm not supposed to constantly nitpick. So Romans chapter 12, verse 10, it says this, and this is a scripture, you could probably memorize this in a day if you wanted to. This is a scripture that you can take and you can start to think about this in those difficult moments. It says, love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Now, just in general, outside of your family, just like in the world, this is not something we naturally do. Take delight in honoring other people. Like, we all love the idea of being honored. Rarely do we actually take the intentional steps to honor someone. I want to talk about these two ideas. To love someone with genuine affection, this is more than just being nice or kind or smiling to them. Those are good things. But to love someone with genuine affection means you need to genuinely decide what it is about that person that you love. What it is about that person that you appreciate, that you value. What are the good things about that person? And you're choosing to focus on those things. It's an important step for us because we tend to see what we're looking for. And if we're driving home assuming that our kids are going to be crazy, when we get home, we will probably see our kids being crazy and extrapolate this idea across whatever the ideas are. We tend to see what we're looking for. So we have to take a moment to look for things that you like, that you love, that you appreciate about people. Be intentional about those things. Even people that you don't prefer to be around is maybe a kind way to say it. Even coworkers, neighbors, people that are difficult in your life, there's an important piece of us saying, what is it about them that is good, that is praiseworthy, that I appreciate? What are the good things? Are we choosing to see these things? I heard this years ago. I don't know where it originally came from, but they were talking about parenting and how oftentimes parents just kind of get in this default of pointing out like the mistakes, like the don't do it that way or don't do that at all, or come back next week or whatever the things are as parents. And this person said, instead of just focusing and naturally pointing out the things that they're doing wrong, he said, catch them doing right. Catch them doing right. When your child does something that is good, when you recognize they made a choice to do the right thing, the good thing, the kind thing, articulate that out loud. Say that out loud. I think this is great for kids, but I think this is probably great for all of us. For your husband, for your wife, for your siblings. Again, people that are close proximity-wise, people that are far. It's so easy just to let these negative thoughts, these negative ideas, and maybe sometimes we say these things out loud, just kind of nitpicking and focusing on the negative. But what if we actually started to recognize the moments where there's good things happen and then say it out loud to them? To tell your kids, to tell your spouse, to tell your family, your parents. What would that look like? What would that do to impact our relationship? To love with genuine affection, and then to honor, to take delight in honoring each other, to regard them with respect, to see the value that they have, and at times to make the decision to defer to them, to say, okay, because I want to honor you, I'm going to choose to do this. It's probably not going to happen naturally. I'm going to choose to let my preference, my idea, my probably better decision in this situation, I'm going to set this aside, and I want to listen to you. I want to take time to hear you. I want to try and do it your way. I want to recognize that maybe my ideas and my ways are not always the best ways. We're looking for reasons to defer to others and how we honor them. And again, none of this is an easy thing to do. None of this is just, okay, great, let me just flip this switch and I'll be able to do these things. These are choices that we've got to make. Again, we're clothing ourselves with these things. I'm saying, I'm going to live this way. I'm going to show up at the table, in my home, in the office, in the community in this way. Now, I want to make it clear because I feel like sometimes churches have done a disservice to people, to different relationships, and the realities of relationships that we're in. There is a difference between focusing on the good instead of the annoying. There's a difference between this idea of giving my kids, the benefit of the doubt when the floor is sprinkled with Fruit Loops. There's a difference between, our loud siblings, our friends or family that have different political views, or the dishwasher issues, or the hamper issues. These are things, and then there's this other category of things like abuse, manipulation, addiction. There's other aspects of relationships that are realities. I recognize the realities of those existing even in this room. It's unlikely that there's a single person in this room. I'm not saying sure if I'm saying this the right way. I'm sure that there is at least a person in this room that's in a relationship. It's unstable and it's unsafe. And this scripture is not meant to say, you need to make allowance for that. That's not what this is talking about. There's a conversation that needs to be happened. There's boundaries that need to be set. Those are things worth talking about, and oftentimes things worth talking to someone else about. Finding a counselor or a pastor or a friend, someone that you guys trust, and having those conversations. When Paul writes this, he's not talking about the way that we're physically injuring or being unsafe with other people. He's talking about these smaller differences that are no longer important, and we get to love others the way that Christ loved us. And these smaller relational tensions that sometimes we allow those frustrations to fester, and it begins to rot that relationship, and we can only see the other person in this frustration, in this negative way. I think that this is one of the reasons why being a part of a small group is a really important thing. We've talked about small groups before. Small groups are kind of what they sound like. It's a small group of people that say, hey, we want to be in a group with other people. We want to talk about life. We want to build friendships with them. We want to get to know some people. And also, we want to try and learn how do we live our lives in a way that kind of reflects the love and the goodness of Jesus. This is what a small group is. And when you get to be a part of a small group, what you find is that there's some people in there that are married, and there's some people that are not married, and there's some people that have kids, and there's some people that don't have kids, and there's people that have a ton of money and not a ton of money. And it's incredible because we all of a sudden get these different perspectives. And I've been a part of small groups with my wife before, and we've had older married couples be able to tell us, like we had these like ginormous, like, I don't know if we're going to make it. And they're like, oh, yeah, you'll be fine. You just need to deal with that. Like, it's just, that frustration, that annoyance, you're going to be, you're going to make it through that thing. There's times we've had conversations with people that are parents and their kids are older than our kids. And we've talked about how, like, I must have the only kid in the world that does this thing. And they're like, no, it's going to be okay. They're going to get through that, And relational tensions, all these things, a group of people, relationships, they are healthiest when others are involved. Relationships are healthiest when we have other people to bounce ideas and questions and frustrations and challenges off of. They get to say, hey, that's really something that you just need to learn how to make an allowance for. Or, no, that's something you should probably talk about, look at, address. Groups are an important thing. I do want to just say out loud, we do have 3 groups that are happening. They're starting up. We've got a group that meets here on Tuesdays every other week. We've got a group that meets in Costa Mesa on Wednesday nights. And then we have the marriage course, which is starting up on this Thursday. And so if you guys are interested in finding a small group to be a part of, I really would love for you guys to do that. I can't say enough positive things. We had one of them meet already, and they had an incredible time. And so I would love for you guys to take that step. Okay, so I want to wrap it up here. There's a practical question that I think that we can all think about and ask ourselves on a regular basis. This question is this: is this an issue that needs to be addressed, or is this an annoyance that needs to be overlooked? As we look at our relationships, our family, our friends, roommates, the people that we're closest with, there are things, and there's probably maybe even a list of things in your mind right now that you're like, I hope he doesn't talk about this one because I want to hold on to it forever. We get to ask ourselves, is this an annoyance that needs to be overlooked, or is this something that needs to be addressed? To ask ourselves and to have an honest conversation with ourselves. Living life in a constant state of frustration is a choice. We're frustrated because we are focusing on the frustrating things. And we get to say, okay, how can I love this person with a genuine affection? How can I honor them in the way that I talk with them? How can I choose to clothe myself with these things? Some of us are suffering from the horn effect inside of our own room. If our relationship with our loved ones is always in chaos, if it always feels strained or stressed, we keep running into the same issues, the same walls. What needs to be addressed, and what do we need to start learning how to overlook? Well, regardless of where you may be at in your faith journey, I believe that everyone has a next step that they can take. If you'd like more information about what it means to put your trust in Jesus, information about getting baptized, or maybe even attending a Discover class to grow more in your faith, you can visit us online at southhills.org/Costa Mesa, and then scroll down to the Next Steps section. If you'd like more information about tithing or supporting South Hills financially, you can visit southhills.org/giving. Thanks again for listening today, and I hope that I get to see you soon.